Joining us now to explore the latest moves by the United States, President Trump. Trita Parsi is the founder of the National Iranian American Council. From New York City, Gustavo Martinez is a Mexican journalist and graduate student in journalism at the City University of New York. From Sydney, Creighton is the economics correspondent for The Australian, and with us in the studio, Fred Fleitz is Senior Vice President of Policy and Programs with the Centre for Security Policy. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Trita, we just heard the courts have blocked the ban for now. There's an appeal being lodged by the White House. This could end up in the Supreme Court. What do you make of this? Do you think this will stand?
I think this is going to have a very hard time being able to stand, because at the end of the day, what the Trump administration inadvertently did is that they have revealed that this was intended to be a Muslim ban. In the interview that Rudy Giuliani gave, he essentially said that the president came to him and asked him, how do I do a Muslim ban? And then Giuliani went and found a way to do so that he actually wouldn't violate the American Constitution, because it would be unconstitutional if it was specifically targeting a religion. But by that, they've already revealed what the intent was. And that, I think, is going to be very important once this goes higher up in the courts.
Despite the fact that the executive order itself does not say it's a religious ban.
Exactly. It doesn't say so, but if they have revealed that that was the intent, that is what's going to be the argument. Now, what the Supreme Court will decide on this, of course, no one knows. But because of this, I think this very well could go all the way to the Supreme Court.
Right. Okay, let's get the view from Australia. Let's go to Creighton. Adam, President Trump had a recent telephone call with the Australian Prime Minister, and that didn't end very well. We get some reports that actually the US president hung up on the Australian Prime Minister. They were talking about refugees from Australia coming here to the United States. But when you look at this telephone conversation, the manner in which we are told it ended, and the kind of travel ban that President Trump has imposed, how is this White House being seen in Australia?
Yeah, well, certainly the phone call story was a political bombshell here in Australia. We weren't expecting to be hearing a story like that. The Prime Minister himself has vehemently denied that the President hung up on him, but nevertheless it's pretty clear from the Prime Minister here as well that it was a robust and testy conversation, and a difficult one. But I think the central point is, and the central one that Australians have taken away, is that the White House will actually honour this deal to take 1,250 refugees on Australia's Manus Island and to have them settled eventually, of course, after extreme vetting, as the President says, settled in the United States. And I think that there's probably no other country in the world that the President would have honoured such a deal for. And so I think you can also see this as a reflection of the strong relationship, even though it was tested a little by this phone call. You know, certainly in the press, a lot of fireworks around the phone call, but the reality is the relationship with the US is still strong.
Fred, let's talk about the travel ban. You're an expert on security policy. President Trump says that this executive order is a national security judgment. But if you look at it, it's a blanket ban on the citizens, nationals of these 7 countries. Let's listen to the response from Iran. Let's watch.
This violates the rights of all human beings. They said, we are committed to our obligations. How is it possible that your embassy issued the visa, printed it onto the passport, signed it, and now Trump says, I don't believe it, and you don't have the right to travel to my country? They are violating all principles and international obligations.
Tough words there from the Iranian leader. Is this collective punishment? Isn't this discriminatory?
I think it's pretty laughable. A nation like Iran, a dictatorship which takes Americans prisoner for years on end, is going to lecture the United States about human rights. I mean, no comments from Iran on the subject make any sense. I'd like to congratulate CGTV for not calling this a Muslim ban. It's not a Muslim ban. This is a political slogan. Indonesia is the largest Muslim nation on earth. Indonesia is not included, so obviously it's not a Muslim ban. You know, if there's someone not in the administration who said something off topic, that doesn't say what the law or what the executive order says. We know what the executive order says. The president said he was going to have strict vetting to keep jihadists out of the United States who we know are being sent here as immigrants by ISIS. These 7 nations were designated by the Obama administration as nations of special concern for terrorism. Trump said he would do this. He's doing it. I guess what really people are surprised at is Trump is a politician who was actually doing what he said he would do as a candidate.
Trita?
Look, if this actually is aimed at stopping terrorists from coming in, then if one were to agree with the idea that just a blanket ban makes sense, which I don't agree with, but if one were to agree with that, then the countries that would have been listed would have been countries that actually have had nationals commit terrorist acts on U.S. soil that has killed Americans, such as Saudi Arabia, such as UAE. Those countries are not included. In fact,
because Obama did not include them. Obama didn't include them in that list.
Well, Mr. Trump is the president, so he can do that if he so wishes.
He used the Obama list.
Why did he use that? He's not bound to what Obama has done. He's not even bound to the agreement that he did with Australia. Hang up on the phone of the Prime Minister.
Changing the subject.
So he can do that if he wants to. But the issue is this, that if he really wanted to go after that, he could have done this. He hasn't done that. And the countries that have been put on the list have 0 nationals that have committed acts of terror on U.S. soil that has left any American killed. That contradiction is something that shows that either he's just following blindly, as you said, what Obama is doing, or that he actually isn't a president that can make up his mind on his own and actually pursue national security. This is adding absolutely nothing to U.S. national security.
Okay.
The other point that I think is important also to make is that that list came as a result of Republicans in the House Judiciary Committee that was including this last minute into the spending bill in 2015, in which they made sure that dual nationals of these countries would not be able to get in using the visa waiver program. It was the same individuals, incidentally, that was consulting with the White House when they came out with this ban. So to put this on Obama, I think really has no legs.
So it wasn't Obama's list.
It was a list that was actually put together by Republicans in the House.
No, Fred, it was Obama's list. And Obama named these 7 nations.
Right, Fred, I just want to get this.
Case, that's still wrong. The issue is to have a blanket ban is a different thing from having a list of countries of concern. Trump has put in a blanket ban. Obama never did that.
Okay.
And if he wanted to make sure that Americans were not killed by terrorists, he would be targeting the countries that actually have nationals who have committed that.
Fred,
instead of just pointing at Obama.
Do you think that...
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Oh, can I just chime in? I just thought, look, I mean, I basically agree with what the other panelists are saying, but I do think that if President Obama had made a similar decision, it wouldn't have attracted anywhere near the controversy that this decision has. And it's because it's President Trump and he's so controversial and he's now in his second, third week of being president. And so I do think that there's a bit of bias in the coverage of this decision. And, so I don't think it should be viewed in the context of domestic US political considerations, and I think that is why the decision has been made. It doesn't seem like a very effective or sensible decision objectively, especially when we're seeing more and more terrorists are homegrown. They are already in countries, whether it be the United States, France, Britain, or even Australia. You know, the terrorists are already there. You know, stopping people coming in doesn't seem to be effective. You know, you can't stop an ideology from infecting your citizens.
All right, let me bring in Gustavo, who's waiting very patiently in New York for us. Gustavo, you know, if we look at the people of the United States, I guess with the exception of Native Americans, all people here are immigrants or the descendants of immigrants. So what kind of message does Donald Trump send when he imposes these kinds of measures? What do you think?
Well, it's a very negative message in a way that people are not welcome in this country. People are not being received as, I mean, nobody... As you're saying, nobody here in this country is a native, only the Native Americans. So by signing this kind of executive orders, they're not welcoming anybody in general. And we saw the chaos that happened just in the airports right after the executive orders were signed. So I think it's not in benefit of the U.S. to have this kind of executive order signed, especially when tensions, the relationships are tense around the world with the U.S.
Fred, let me ask you this, because the 7 countries that we've heard about, I mean, we often hear that, yes, President Obama did, in fact, initially list those countries, but he did so in response to a specific threat from Iraq. That's the one thing. The other is that he didn't ban visas because refugees, of course, don't have visas to come to this country.
Well, I don't think President Obama had a serious policy to fight terrorism. Mr. Trump wants to fight terrorism. I think he's going to go after homegrown terrorism, too. 6 of these nations are failed states. That's why they're on the list. Iran is a state sponsor of terror. That's why it is on the list. Why isn't Saudi Arabia on the list? I was about to say, we set this together. Why isn't Saudi Arabia on the list? Because Saudi Arabia is not a failed state and can cooperate with our government.
Is it producing people that are committing acts of terror?
Look, in my view,
are they funding terrorism?
I'll concede to you.
money going to ISIS from Saudi Arabia?
Look, I'll make news here. I'd put Saudi Arabia on the list. I think we can agree on that. But The president, possibly in an effort for bipartisanship,
Right.
chose the Obama list for the 7 nations to temporarily ban entry into the United States. It has nothing to do with Islam or Muslims. It has to do with U.S. security.